Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from WealthManagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. I'm Diana Britton, managing editor of WealthManagement.com, and in this podcast we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast, and thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being, and today's guest definitely counts on that score. His name is Aaron Klein, former CEO, co-founder, and current board member at Nitrogen. Aaron, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really excited about this one.
Thanks so much, Diana. I'm really excited about it as well.
Yeah, so a lot of people, many advisors know Aaron as, the sort of super friendly, charismatic leader of Nitrogen, formerly Riskalyze, which is the
Yep.
company he founded about 13 years ago as a risk tolerance documentation tool right here in my backyard in Auburn, California.
There you go.
But he's since moved to Boise, Idaho. But Aaron, I've known you for a long time. You've been a friend of mine, friend of the
Yeah.
brand's. And I was actually just thinking back to when we first met. And I don't know if you remember this, but you came into the wealthmanagement.com offices in New York on 6th Avenue. And this was like when you first launched
Wow.
Riskalyze.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember sitting down with me and Jason Lahita at the time and
It's
pitching
bringing back old
pitching
memories.
Riskalyze. And I
Yeah,
mean, I was a little bit skeptical because as a journalist, like, oh, what's this new thing? Like, we're a little skeptical, as
for sure.
we're supposed to be. So anyways, I was just thinking about that. But Aaron almost always has a smile on his face. He's got a smile on his face right now. Although you guys can't see it, but Aaron has had his challenges throughout his journey,
Mm,
and sort of balancing running a major fintech company with adopting and raising 3 children. And we're going to dig into his personal story a little bit today. And I think a lot of folks have seen pictures of you, Aaron, and your
hmm
beautiful family on social media, or they've seen your family, your kids at the Fearless conferences,
Sure.
but don't really know the backstory
Yeah.
behind building it. And it's the international adoption process is a very difficult process,
hmm
right?
Yep.
So I guess I wanted to start there and kind of
Yeah.
what motivated you and your wife to adopt. What was that decision process like for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the things that I just love that this podcast exists and that you created this like really unique space to have these kinds of conversations is, social media is a place where I don't think it works super well to just like complain about life. And there are things that are great. Like, I mean, I have been a very fortunate person in so many regards, and yet, like people go through hard things, and we're going to talk about a couple of them today. And social media is not really a place where I tend to go and just, kind of like blah all over
Yeah.
social media about like, what's going wrong today.
Yeah.
Just kind of not in my nature. And so
Some people do,
I know, and I'm
and
not trying
that's
to judge
fine.
them, but
Yeah.
that's just kind of not me. And so, I loved your framing of this of like let's get real and talk about some of those challenges, because I do think sometimes that can kind of create this false perspective that like some people just have no challenges in life. And so I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's really cool. Um, you know when you talk about like what motivated us to adopt, we got married. We actually got married pretty young. We were 22 and 20. And I actually think it's a great thing. I know it's not very common these days, but we kind of like grew up together,
Mm.
kind of facing the world together. And I love that. And my wife is still my best friend, and we spend a lot of time together and love every minute of it. And so we got married. A few years in, it's kind of like we were wanting to start a family. Kids weren't coming. We were never diagnosed with any reason we couldn't biologically have kids. It just like wasn't happening right away. And we thought about it and spent some time talking about it. And it actually became international adoption became like a very easy decision because I had my youngest sister was adopted from Romania. So I knew
Mm.
about the process. I knew how it worked. We talked a lot about it. We were both excited about it. And so we kind of have said we think it was just God's plan A for us. And so it became the right decision for us. And that was like, so we were, I don't know, married 5 years and we started the process in June of 2006.
Mm. And I mean, tell us what the actual process was like.
Yeah, it's involved. I mean, so first you apply, that's the easy part. Then, they kind of accept you and say, "Great, like we'd love to have you in the program." Now you need to do all of this paperwork, and there's this thing called a dossier, and it's actually quite fascinating because it's basically a really massive collection of legal documents to kind of prove to a foreign government that you actually exist and are a real person.
Uh,
If you think about it, what they're trying to do is something very, very noble. They're trying to prevent human trafficking, right? They're trying to
yeah.
go like are these real people who actually want, like, they're not trying to recruit a servant for their house. They're trying to parent a child.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole bunch that goes into that: background checks, criminal background checks, marriage certificate, birth certificates, all that, like reference letters. All of these things, by the way, get notarized, and then they get shipped off to like the Secretary of State of your state to verify that that notary is actually a notary. And then it gets shipped off to the State Department to verify that the Secretary of your state, the Secretary of State of your state, is actually the Secretary of State of your state. Because right, because this is going to a foreign government, so
Wow.
it's very funny. You're like scared to death that you're going to lose this document, this massive like binder of documents. And then it all gets like, they drive a rivet through it so that it can't be messed with, and then they ship it off to the foreign government. And so, you've done all that work. The joke in adoption circles is they call it your paperwork pregnancy. And so you do all
Mm.
that work, and then you just wait and you wait and you wait. And for us, I think we applied in June of '06. Don't know when we got the paperwork done, but we weren't matched with our first son Spencer until, I want to say, it was like July or August of '07. So it was basically a little over a year
Mm.
before we were matched. And so then, man, you kind of, all the different adoptive couples are kind of like on these online forums talking with each other. So, people are like, I got my match. I got my match. You're kind of guessing based on when you all know, when you put your applications in, like who's coming up to the top of the list. And
Okay.
so, so we were like, oh man, we're probably going to get our match in the next week or two. And sure enough, we get this email, and the social worker calls, and we open the email, and we have these photos of this amazing little boy that's going to be our son. And so you accept the match, and then of course you do the actual process of like flying there and bringing them home. And in our case, I think the match was like July or August, and we went in November of 2007 and brought Spencer home.
Mm. Wow. I mean, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in that process?
Yeah, I mean, some of it would be rules can change in the middle of the
Mm.
process, and until the adoption is finalized, it's not done. Our daughter was next, and we had, so Spencer was born in South Korea. A year or so later, we decided to apply again, and we kind of wanted him to have a sister. And so we're looking, South Korea had ballooned up to like a 3-year wait time, which to us meant like, I guess there's not as much need there. So why don't
Mm.
we, just kind of look around, and our same adoption agency opened a program in Ethiopia, relatively short wait times, young kids. And so we're like, let's apply to Ethiopia. That's great. And so we applied there. We were matched with our daughter Emma, and we brought her home at kind of the very end of 2009. Both Spencer and Emma were 8 months old when they came to the United States. And so, probably the big challenge from there was that between the time that we adopted Emma and the time that we adopted our third, the process changed a lot. And so
Mm.
the way that worked out, we got involved in a bunch of nonprofit work in Ethiopia after Emma's adoption. we're going back every year. We're taking teams back to kind of see this school project we're involved in. We meet at a public orphanage there in Addis, the kid who ends up becoming our oldest, right? And so
Mm,
he's 7 years old at the time we meet him. He's 11 years old by the time he comes home 4 years later. Between those times, the process changed. So we actually had to finalize that adoption in 2016. My wife and I both flew to Ethiopia. We appeared in Ethiopian court. And then you could, I guess, just go drop your kid back off at the orphanage, but he's ours. And so, like, we did not feel good about that. So, Casey lived with friends of ours there in Addis
mm.
with, our new son under Ethiopian law. She lived there for 4 weeks. I flew back home, kept running a business, did the single parenting thing for a couple of weeks. And then I flew back as soon as his visa got issued by the United States government, and we did the visa appointment together, and then we all flew home together. And so, long process, and she had to live there for 4 weeks. So that was
Wow.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, what is Addis? You're Addis Ababa, right? I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm saying it
Yeah.
right,
You're
but
saying it
yeah.
right. Yes.
It's what is it like? And like, I mean, how did you what kind of perspective did you guys get kind of going back to that country and working with the people there?
Yeah, it's so Addis is like, I mean, I enjoy it. I find it fun. It is a massive city.
Hmm.
It's like, I want to say it's like 8 million people. So it is a very, very large city, and it has, a lot of the challenges that a lot of very, very large cities have when you combine them with, a country that is, Ethiopia is, I believe, still the fastest growing country in Africa. So it's definitely like really, we're starting to see a lot of really good economic growth there and some good things happening there. Addis has a lot of those endemic challenges, but it's still a beautiful city with a lot of progress and a lot of really great things happening. And then, what I find fun is to kind of get out of the traffic and the noise and to go down into the countryside where our daughter was born down in the south. We visited down there a number of times. Our son was born a little bit north. We haven't been able to go north. It hasn't really been safe since then. They've
Hmm.
had, kind of civil war in the country up in the north. And so that hasn't really been safe to do. But we've traveled pretty extensively in the south. The school project we support is down in the south, about 2.5, 3 hours south of Addis. Yeah, it's a beautiful place, and it's amazing to just drive through the countryside of Ethiopia and just look at just the sheer beauty of what is an amazing country.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, what you learned about the international adoption process throughout this
Yeah.
experience, because I thought it was really interesting, about what happened in South Korea and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think, probably two things. One is that it's just interesting to me how, like, it's the one thing that is wildly bureaucratic, and I still think it probably should be, because it's
Mm,
how, I don't find myself often thinking that, bureaucracy and slowness is good.
yeah.
And that's probably a controversial opinion, because a lot of adoptive parents would probably say no, like, it should be a lot faster. We want to get kids into permanence with their parents. And I'm totally sympathetic to that. And at the same time, I sit there and I go, human trafficking is a really, really big problem, and it is
Mm,
really difficult to, authenticate and make sure that we are not feeding that, and that we're not feeding that beast in some way, shape, or form. And so, I don't know. It always felt like way too long, and then at the same time, you're like, but I'm glad that we're safeguarding kids in the world, and
mm.
we're following good process to make sure that that happens. So it may be the one part of government that I like, that it's a little bit slow. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, here are some kind of interesting statistics, I guess, about
Yeah,
international adoption. American families adopted 1,517 children from abroad in fiscal year 2022, the lowest annual total in the
yeah.
21st century. I mean, that seemed pretty low to me.
It's
And
down.
nearly,
It's down a
yeah,
lot. It was, 10 years ago. It was, I believe, in the 20,000s, 25,000, somewhere in that range.
yeah, I've got 23,000 in
There you go.
2004.
Yeah.
and nearly 40% of them were born in one of three countries. This is 2022:
Yeah.
Colombia, India, and South Korea.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has fallen 93% from
Yeah.
2004 to 2022.
And the driver of that is kind of the other thing that I learned about international adoption, which is countries have this deep sense of shame about international adoption. Like, we're
Mm,
not capable of taking care of our kids.
hmm,
And I don't really think that that should be. I can honestly say that uh it just doesn't feel to me like that's the right framing. But it is very interesting. Korea, it's interesting, Korea is still in the top three in 2022. South Korea is actually where international adoption was in the United States was invented. And what happened was, after the Korean War, there were a bunch of Korean war orphans who were had Korean mothers and American GI fathers,
mm,
and they were shunned by Korean society.
mm-hmm,
It was just they were not accepted. They were kind of half American GI. They were not accepted in Korean society. And the other thing is, Korea, by the way, another beautiful country, wonderful place, beautiful people, amazing people. Something that is starting to culturally change there is that it has been a very patriarchal society where, everything runs on kind of bloodline through the man. And so what's really interesting is that international adoption from China, for example, was all girls because of their one child policy. Okay. International adoption in Korea was almost all boys
mm,
because if you were the daughter of first of all, if you're the child of a single mother, you don't even get your mother's name because
mm,
like the state assigns you a new surname because everything runs through the man. Okay.
mm-hmm,
But then if you're the daughter of a single mother, eventually you're going to get married and you just kind of get integrated into your husband's bloodline. And then all that status as the child of a single mother kind of disappears. So it just kind
mm-hmm,
of gets papered over and it's gone. If you're the son of a single mother, it's going to be really difficult for you to get married because your like future father-in-law kind of like looks at you and goes, well, I don't really know who you are. I don't know what your family is. I don't know if you're from a good family. And so it's very interesting. That's what drove adoption in Korea. And then Bryant Gumbel, who was the like Today Show host
mm-hmm.
in the 1988 Seoul Olympics, actually said on air, which I just kind of, I still bristle at this, that South Korea's number one export was children. Okay.
Mm,
And so, there was this amazing couple back in the 50s that went to Congress and got a law passed to allow these Korean war orphans to be adopted in the United States. That couple had six biological kids of their own. Their names were Harry and Bertha Holt, and our adoption agency was Holt International.
oh,
They went to Korea and brought home 8 2-year-old Korean war orphans. And,
mm,
one for each person in their family to hold, like amazing, amazing couple. And Spencer actually still has a letter from Grandma Holt that
mm,
that was sent to him after he was adopted through Holt. So anyway, Bryant Gumbel kind of made that comment on air, and it really just kind of like perpetuated this cycle of shame about international
mm,
adoption that I just don't think is very healthy, and it's one of the things that. I think has led to those numbers really, really coming down because a lot of countries are just closing to
mm.
international adoption because of that. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. And so, I mean, I want to talk a little bit about Spencer,
Yeah.
and sort of the journey that you've been on with your kids, raising them. And
Yeah.
as we all know, as parents, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to raise kids. And I
Hmm.
know two of your kids have special needs.
Hmm.
But in 2018, Spencer kind of went through a pretty dark time in his life. I know you told me.
Yeah.
And so what happened during that time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say we were kind of naive early on and we're just like, oh, we're going to adopt really young kids. They'll be 8 months old when they come home, and then they won't have any memory or trauma or challenges. And the truth is like all adoption, adoption is a beautiful thing, and all adoption stems from trauma. I don't
Mm,
care if you're it might be there's loss because you're separated from your biological mother or father, at birth or afterwards. It could be that maybe you're adopted here in the United States by your stepfather or something like that. Well, there's still some kind of loss there. Either
Mhm.
your biological father passed away, or there's a divorce, or there's abandonment, or there's something. So all adoption comes from loss. And we had to learn that. And when our third came home, Teddy, we were like, hey, we're gonna do this thing called counseling. He goes, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go. And we're like, sorry, you're a Klein. All Kleins go to therapy. It's just
Mm.
what we do, because we learned that that was something that you just have to do. And we would walk through it with our kids. Yeah, in 2018, Spencer, whether connected to any, hard to say whether it was connected to any kind of adoption trauma. He also had tragically like lost his best friend who drowned in a
Oh
canal, and
gosh.
so he's pretty young. And it was this crazy thing that happened. It's like he'd had kind of a rough week, and he'd said a few things that kind of sounded a little off, but you just don't know if it's just like a little boy's imagination like running wild or something like that. And on Sunday, like all of a sudden, you know, he's like outside, and we can't find him, and we kind of like find him, and he's hallucinating, and he's like seeing people that are not there, and he's like talking to them, and we can like barely communicate with him. Like we're really loud, and like just like kind of like looking in his eyes, like we can kind of get some words into him, and get some words back out. But it was weird. It was like he'd snapped and he was not there. And I've
Gosh.
I've just never been so scared in my entire life. We did, an MRI and an EEG and like all this stuff. We're talking to all these doctors. And one of the doctors we talked to says, this could be this thing called PANS. And he goes, this is beyond me. Like, I don't know how to diagnose that. I don't know how to treat that. You should really talk to this guy, Dr. Kiki Chang. And I said, oh, that's great. So he down at Stanford University, he founded this clinic, clinic on PANS, and he's done a lot of research on it. And I said, that's great. Like, can we get a referral to him? And he said, oh, I don't know him. I was just thinking you could Google him or something like that. Like he's written like 300 academic papers and all this stuff. And so I was like, oh, great. So, I Googled him, and, he's again based down in Silicon Valley. And, so I just like put my best, sales guy hat on, and went to work on convincing him that we had an interesting case that he should take. And we by the way, we still have a relationship with him. He's just such an amazing guy. And he wrote back almost immediately. He's like, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so backed up. I don't think I could do an appointment for like 3 weeks. And we're like, hey, we'll take it. And
Yeah. Hmm.
so got into the appointment with him. He was able to diagnose it as PANS. PANS stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatry Syndrome. And basically, something in your immune system has malfunctioned. It thinks your brain is under attack from an infection. It sends all these antibodies to your brain, and then your brain starts to swell, and then it's pressing against your skull, and weird stuff starts to happen. And
Mm.
so there are theories, and I don't know how you would prove this, but like there are theories that a lot of mental illness could actually be something like PANS at the root of it. Like what we call schizophrenia might actually just be somebody suffering from an autoimmune illness that is causing their brain to kind of swell and causing those kinds of symptoms. Hard to say, hard to know, but like that's a point of discussion. So the treatment for this, fortunately, we got him diagnosed before he hit puberty. It's way more effective to go into remission if you can treat it before puberty.
Mm.
But the treatment is this thing called IVIG, intravenous immunoglobulin. They're basically transfusing the immune system. The body can only handle so much of it. So we did 2 days in a row, like 9-hour days. We're at home. A nurse comes into the house, hooks him up to an IV, has to take his blood pressure every 15 minutes to make sure his system is handling it. And they're transfusing
Mm.
him with this, immunoglobulin. And we had to do 10 treatments over the course of, a month apart. So it took 10 months. And after 10 months, like he went into remission, and he has not had any flares or anything like that with that ever since. He's just been in remission. He's thriving. we're incredibly grateful that that's true.
Yeah, that's great news. Great to hear. Well, Aaron, I know I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to
Yeah,
make sure we talk about, you know, you stepping away from nitrogen and kind
sure.
of what's next for you. You stepped away late last year, right?
Yep,
Made the decision to um, step down as CEO of the company that
yep.
you've built. And I mean, what made you step away? I just feel like that was probably a very difficult, decision that you,
Yeah.
took a long time for you to make that decision.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, look, I think in the broad scheme of things, through all the highs and lows of life, I've always felt like, my faith has been very real to me. God put us on this earth for a purpose. We're supposed to work every day to make it a more just and prosperous place. And for as long as we're alive, we still have work to do. And with nitrogen, it just really felt like it was time. Like I really thought that the business needed a different kind of leader for its next chapter. And I also was really ready to decompress after like 12 and a half years of sprinting really, really hard.
Yeah.
And that was without a doubt like very emotional because you love the team and you love the organization. Um, but at the same time I was just really grateful because look, I can still support and help and cheer it on from my new seat. I just got to go, a few weeks ago to Fearless, to our customer conference, spoke, supported the team, helped out in every way that I could. And so I feel really grateful that I can kind of have the best of both worlds there. But it was time. It was time, and I really did think that the business needed a different kind of leader for the next chapter. And Dan is a great CEO. Brings we have a lot of ways that I think we're similar, and a lot of ways that we have different styles. And he's got some really interesting skill sets that have helped the company scale and accelerate some different things at scale. So I've already learned some things getting to watch him from my
Mhm.
board seat, and it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, and excuse me, that's Dan Zitting that Aaron's talking about, who took over as
Yes.
CEO when Aaron stepped down. What's next for you? Yeah, what
It's
have you
a
been
good
thinking
question.
about?
It's a good question. I mean, so first of all, I had always told my wife, I'm like, whenever I get to the finish line, whatever that looks like for Riskalyze, which became nitrogen, I'm like, I definitely like slap me if I don't take 6 months off just to kind of decompress, for before I jump into something full time. And then she is on her way to becoming a counselor with an emphasis in adoption trauma. And
Oh,
so she was
wow.
finishing one degree and then planning on starting her master's. And so, we looked at it and she was like, it would be really bad if we missed our breaks because I'm going to have this like 6 month break between degree programs. Like it'd be really bad if we missed our breaks by 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, that would not be intelligent. So 2024 kind of became this year of rest and recharge. And I feel like it's been so great. I feel like I've spent a lot of time thinking about like how to actually do a job with high intensity, like running a company, like building a company, but not just sprint, but like really learn like how to do these little mini sprints that really kind of measure your pace so that you can actually do marathon style, marathon level distances. So I will start a new company. I'm pretty decided on that. I think I've got a great idea for it. I'm still thinking that through and kind of working it out. We're going to build quietly for a while and then share what we've done with the world. And I just can't wait for that because I'm looking forward to a lot of financial advisors giving us feedback on it and a lot of people outside of financial advice giving us feedback on it. I just can't wait. I love the building phase. And so creating something new is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I'm on the edge of my seat, wondering what it is. But is it in the wealth management space? Will we see you
Well,
build something in this space?
you will see me. I will say it is a little bit broader than just the wealth management space, but I do believe financial advisors will be the first, kind of vertical specialization that we will focus on. primarily because I have like 20,000 of them as friends. So,
Yeah.
like it would be kind of dumb not to. So yeah, that's kind of my thought process. And but it is broader than that. And so I'm excited to kind of, work in a broader way. And by the way, what I love about that for financial advisors is it allows us, I think, to build something that is really, really powerful, that frankly you can kind of have a lower price point for because you can get customers out of a much bigger market. If you're building in a constrained market, it kind of forces you sometimes to have a higher price point because
Hmm.
you can't possibly recoup your capital of building it without that. So I'm kind of enthused and excited about that. We'll see how it all pans out. There's a lot of thinking to be done before I get there, but that's kind of the theory of the case, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I just wanted to touch on one thing, Aaron, that you
Yeah.
mentioned. And I think that it's really relevant for a lot of my listeners.
Hmm.
And that is, how do you build a company and not do it at a sprint? Like, I mean, because I think that um, this
Yeah.
industry is, financial advisors are business owners on their own in their own right, and
Yes.
I talk a lot about on this podcast about advisors just kind of like dying at the desk, and just working
Yeah.
really long hours, and how did you what does that look like in terms of how you've come up with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, let's be clear, different businesses are different. So financial advisors are a service-based business. So it can be really hard in the early days because you're just starting out, you're trying to build a book of business. You are the person. Like you're the
Yeah.
person, and there's no way around that. But what I would say is this. Number one, I think it's important to try and really um actually amp up the pace of the sprint during the times that you are working. Like try to like if you're working at like on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're working at like a 6 level of intensity all the time, try to figure out how to work at like a 10 level of intensity during these times that you're working, and then like really figure out how to disconnect and like spend other time doing other things. That's still hard for me. Like it's definitely difficult. I think any entrepreneur that's difficult for, but you certainly can't go 10 all the time, but I think a lot of people go 6 all the time. And I think what is probably better is to go like 10 some of the time, recharge, 10 some of the time, recharge. So it's like you're actually going to run this race. Marathon may be a little bit of a misleading analogy, and I'm not a marathoner, so I probably shouldn't use it that way. But like it's more like a series of sprints with recharge in between. And I think that's probably the right way to do it. That's certainly what I'm gonna, how I'm gonna architect life going
Hmm.
forward. And I the only other thing I'll say is I do think that there's something to be said for having somebody that you pay something or give something of value to who has done it before and who can advise you and give you perspective. And the most important thing that you're getting out of that relationship, no matter what business you're in, is like, how how can I not get in the mode of like killing myself, throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks? And how can I limit my effort to just doing the things that I know are going to work or that I have a high probability are going to work? And then, I can adjust if it's not working. But like there were a lot of times in the early journey of Riskalyze where I was throwing, I mean, I'm working like 80, 90 hours a week because I'm throwing everything at the wall because I don't know what is going to stick. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into that space. And I will say this: I don't think I'm going to have to do that in this next company because I've kind of seen the movie before, and so I'm going to be able, to. There's a lot of things that I will just go, oh no, that's a dead end. Like I wasted a lot of time on that before. I'm not going to waste that time again. So if you can get advisors who can kind of give you that advice, I'm trying to think about that with this new thing and go like, well, what parts of it do I not know, and how can I try to find the right advice from the beginning?
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Well, I'm afraid we're just about out of time. Aaron, I feel like we could go on all day. But I'd like to thank my guest, Aaron Klein, for being on the podcast and, sharing his story with me and just, getting real with us. I really appreciate that, Aaron.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you for everything that you've done for, wealthmanagement.com over the years for our brand, just being a friend of the brand. I know you've won several wealthies. You're always in the
I've got
audience
one
at
sitting
the
right
wealthy.
behind me there on that
Yeah.
shelf. Absolutely. I'm very proud of that and grateful for it. And so thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and if you'd like to reach out to Aaron, you can email him at ak@aaronklein.com.
Anytime.
Very easy, yeah. But if you are listening to this and you have a struggle and wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of WealthManagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.